Hey everybody, let's talk about gambling. Seems to be more ever present now that it's become more legalized and accepted in sporting events. I'll be sitting there watching a hockey game, and then the betting lines show up some point or another, and even the announcer of the game will mention them and say them and such. So recently in the Wall Street Journal, there was a book that was reviewed talking about this. And he writes, it's by Jonathan Cohen, sounds Jewish. The book is called Losing Big. There have always been Americans driven to ruin by gambling, but never have so many been driven to ruin so easily, and never has government done so much to enable them to gamble. This reviewer mentions that Jonathan Cohen says in his book, Losing Big, an incisive and efficiently written account of the slow rise and sudden ubiquity of legal sports gambling in America. And he talks about, in this review, taking from the book, the difference between other addictions, booze, cigarettes, and gambling. And what he mentions, very interestingly enough, kind of dovetails with what Jewish tradition says and thinks about it. And he talks about, so what is the difference? It's both addictive, both aren't the best habits to do. So he says, gambling is quite different. At the heart of a market economy is the relationship between producer and purchaser. The one generates a product or service, the other decides if it's good enough to buy. Gambling, whatever else it may be, isn't that. The sports book doesn't provide a service that a rational actor would buy. The bettor doesn't want to spend money at all. He wants to walk away with more. And he shows that's the separation between gambling and alcohol. The producer of a bottle of bourbon or a pack of cigarettes has created a thing people find sufficiently gratifying to purchase with their own money. The bookie, online or otherwise, offers only the possibility, often illusory, of gain. You see, when it comes to these other addictions, there's a real tangible thing there. But when it comes to gambling, there isn't something tangible. Yes, there's the hope to win, and we know that there's a risk, but the person is assuming, otherwise they wouldn't do it. No one walks away and loses money. One says they want to lose money. The person is assuming they're going to win. And that's interesting because the Jewish view of gambling, we call it an asmachta. An asmachta, I'll just read you a nice summation of it. The Talmud discusses the concept of asmachta, which refers to an agreement made with the understanding that it will not actually need to be fulfilled, rendering the agreement not binding. Like a person goes in agreement, but not really, he's just saying it. He puts an exaggerated clause in there, and there really isn't the expectation that it'll be fulfilled. And so it's the same thing with betting. There's the expectation you're going to win, not lose. And that is why it's kind of considered stealing gambling, because the other person, once again, isn't willingly losing, and it's based on this idea you're not really getting a product when you gamble. That's it on a theoretical basis. On a practical level, I witnessed how this has become far too ever-present in our society this past Shabbat. This past Shabbat was after Friday night. We came into shul to find out the score of the Toronto Maple Leaf Florida Panther game. It was Game 6. Yes, the Leafs ended up losing the series in Game 7 at home, but Game 6 was here in Florida. And I'm a Toronto Maple Leaf fan. My son-in-law is. There's other people here, my gabbai. There was kind of a buzz, a pro-Toronto buzz going on over here. And so we came into shul and we found out that Toronto had won. Couldn't believe it, forced a Game 6. And so that was kind of in the air. Okay. At the end of shul, a guy comes up to me and says, I lost $300 because of you. Lost 300. How did he lose $300? Apparently, before my drasha, two guys in the back made a bet. Would Rabbi Nightingale mention the Toronto Maple Leafs in his drasha or not? That was the bet. This guy bet that I would. I didn't. I didn't tie it in. I didn't bring it in. And so he lost $300. This is problematic because next time they can maybe come up to me and say, Rabbi, mention this in the drasha, I'll cut you in for half. Who knows? I'll let you know if that ever happens. But this is how prevalent it's become, that we're so used to this that even now they're betting on what rabbis' drushes will mention. Look, the bottom line is we all know gambling isn't good for the soul. It's risky. It could be addictive. And let's face it, the house always wins. When it comes to the producers of gamblers, cards, whatever it isn't a tzedakah project. They're there to make money. Now, I understand. If a few people are getting together to socialize, to have a card game, it isn't big stakes. Yeah, you're willing to maybe lose $100 or $200, but that's the cost of perhaps enjoying an evening. Fine, there's nothing wrong with that. It's more the bigger stuff. And I recall, and I can, in retrospect, now understand maybe why my father did this. But my father used to always go out to these poker games with his pals and such. And we would ask him, did you win? Did you lose? He always had the same answer. I broke even. I broke even. Perhaps the reason he would tell us that is if he would come back and say, yeah, I made $300, I made $500. That would give us a feeling, us children, us brothers, of, maybe I should try that out. But we never got the gambling bug. At least I didn't. I don't know about my brothers. One brother maybe, but we never really got that. Why? Perhaps because my dad didn't give us any sense that this was a legitimate way to get money, to make funds. So, gambling, once again, if you're doing it here and there for a little bit of fun, socializing, I get that. Generally, unfortunately, it's gone too far in our society and too widespread that it isn't a good thing when they start gambling on the rabbi's drasha. Have a good Shabbat.